So today I wanted to talk about agricultural preparedness. Now, in the United States, they pretty much disbanded civil defense between 1975 and 1990. From about 1980 until 1990, civil defense only existed as far as publications go, where you could get publications from FEMA. Now, what's interesting is FEMA did a series of analysis of Soviet civil defense. I have an original set of the 5 books where they analyze Soviet civil defense. And what's interesting is the Russians summarized civil defense for agriculture in a publication of less than 100 pages. Everything is condensed. It has all kinds of tables, suggestions on how to preserve your animals, your plants, and what the radiation effects are on all of these. It also goes into talking about how to protect them. This information is absent in U.S. literature. I don't know if they destroyed it or they hid it in federal depositories. I got these books back in, I guess, 1990, 1992, before FEMA stopped publishing them. And they're very useful. And what we'll do is I'll show you a couple examples of some of the information, because you can't get this stuff anywhere else. This table, if you look at it on a full-size computer screen or a TV, you can read the numbers. This is a very important table. This is the table that the Soviets used in order to figure the blast effects of different size weapons. Everything is in kilotons on the left, and pressure is on the top in PSI. Distances are in kilometers, so you'll have to change that to miles or use kilometers. But this gives you really good overpressure data from different size weapons. This is what the Soviets actually used for planning. So you can go ahead and copy this off your computer screen with screen capture and use this. This table is very important. It gives you sickness and fatality information for cattle, sheep, pigs, and domestic fowl. Radiation doses are on the left column, and it shows you this is an accumulated dose over 24 hours. So the first column is sick, the second is dead. So you can see here what the accumulated doses of radiation are in a 24-hour period that makes farm animals sick and kills farm animals. This chart was used for planning in the Soviet Union. You can do a screen capture by halting the video on your computer, and you can print this. This table is very important. This is damage to vegetation from cumulative radiation doses. So what happens is you have a listing here and percentage of lethal dose, and it tells you what happens to the plants. Now, in another table, I will show you the lethal dose for the various farm plants. But what this one does is if you take any lethal dose, and in the right-hand column, it gives you a percentage. So if you look here on the top line, it says percentage of lethal dose is 10%. So if you multiply whatever the lethal dose is for that plant by 10%, it shows it has no effect. Down at the bottom, sharp decline in growth. So if you have 60% of a lethal dose, it will do sharp declines in growth. And then it shows you 50% plant death and 100%. Now, I did experiments for kids in junior and senior high where we got seeds that had been dosed by radiation, and they grew those seeds to see what the stunning effects, death effects were of those. So this is similar to a high school exercise, but this gives you definite information you can use. This is your critically important table. This gives you your produce: oats, corn, peas, tomatoes, flax, gives pine trees, oak trees, maple. Also gives you sugar beets, potatoes, so it gives you crops that are above ground, below ground, and also shows you the trees you would use to make various things. This table shows lethal dose of gamma radiation for various plants. Okay, and this is at the stage where their leaves are out. So this is the lethal dose. You would use it on the last chart I showed you to show you what kind of different conditions you would have. Now this bottom paragraph is very interesting. You can put the video on hold and read it. What this does is it tells you that seeds are much more resistant to radiation than plants. So if you're stockpiling seeds, they can suffer much more exposure than an actual plant. So you can see down here what's really important is if you have seeds stored, for instance with wheat, even if it had an accumulated dose of 15,000 rads or 25,000 for buckwheat, it goes to show you how much more resistant seeds are than plants. This should be key to your survival planning. This page is important in planning. What it does is tells you by the various phases that a plant is in what the damage will be by an accumulated dose. And what I'll do is zoom in on this so you can read it. So what's happening is you're looking at losses of plants based on doses and rads on the left. And the interesting thing is here, this breaks it up into what stage the plant is in. If it's tilled in, the emergence of the plant, heading and flowers, and ripening. And then for potatoes, it does the same thing, but it does it based on percentage of growth in centimeters, budding, flowering. This is a table for peas, and you can see potatoes can withstand much more radiation than other types of crops because it's an in-the-ground crop. And what you would want to do is heavily lime them if you knew there was going to be a nuclear attack. And that way, the calcium in the lime could offset some of the radioactive isotopes. So it would help you to offset some of what you're seeing here. Now, what's important about this Soviet civil defense publication that was translated into English and analyzed is not only does it cover nuclear radiation, but it covers chemical and biological also, which you would have in World War III. This table is very interesting. What it's doing is there's two forms of chemical agents, persistent and non-persistent. This table is showing you how much penetration into the plant there would be with two types of persistent chemical agents. One of them is mustard gas and the other is nerve gas. So here, approximate depth of penetration of persistent chemical agents of various materials. So if you're looking here, what's interesting is it starts with soil that's plowed, natural grassland, compacted snow, loose snow, and then interestingly it goes on down and it gets into agricultural materials. So here you're seeing how many centimeters of penetration a chemical agent would get into a stack of hay. They have stacks, bales, and then they also have loose grain and grain in sacks. And then you have other commodities, frozen meat, animal fat, vegetable oil. This is showing you the penetration into bulk materials by persistent chemical agents. This is incredibly important if you have to sort and use contaminated material. It tells you how much material you would have to remove from the pile to get to the core that's not contaminated. Now, the last thing I wanted to tell you was this data came from the Soviets actually doing experiments during nuclear detonations and with radioactive materials on the animals and plants themselves. So they actually designed fallout shelters for cattle. So this is a fallout shelter for cows. This one holds 4 cows. Shows you how to build it, shows you the feed trays and how to set it up, and how to build a sloped entrance to get down into it. So this one would be good for a small family farm because it holds 4 animals the size of a cow. Now this is totally absent in U.S. civil defense planning. You can't find anything like this. You can build this yourself at home in a couple days if you need to. In the United States, they did an experiment where they built a huge underground shelter and they put an entire dairy herd in it. And they tested that to see if the animals would actually maintain production of milk after a nuclear exposure. But this was only a limited experiment, and you can look that up online. Now, I looked online and I couldn't find this publication anywhere. And this is the government report numbers and the title. You may be able to find it on the used book market. But if this type of information is useful to you, let me know, because I have a lot more material like this I got when I was working in this field. So please comment, and we'll see you on the next video.